What if I told you that the nights you spend staring at the ceiling, unable to shut your mind off, aren't proof that something's broken in you, but that something extraordinary might be trying to break through? That the very thoughts keeping you awake could be the invitation you've been waiting for. It's 3 in the morning. You've already flipped your pillow to the cool side twice. The amber glow of the streetlight spills across your bedroom wall. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slams. You pull the blanket tighter, glance at your phone even though you know you shouldn't, and try to will your mind into silence. But it isn't listening. It races through the grocery list you forgot to finish, replays that awkward conversation from 3 days ago, plans tomorrow's meeting, skips ahead to next month's bills, and just for good measure tosses in an old regret from college you haven't thought about in years. You try everything you've been told to do. Deep breathing, counting backwards from 100, picturing yourself on a quiet beach at sunset, but your mind ignores you. It's like trying to get a toddler to sit still during a fireworks show. And right there, if you're like most people, you make the assumption, this is bad, my mind is broken, I have to fix it. But over 2,500 years ago, Buddhist teachers knew this restless, racing mind inside and out. They didn't have LED alarm clocks or the blue glow of smartphones, but they knew exactly what it was to lie awake with a head full of noise. And here's the surprise, they didn't see it as a malfunction. They saw it as a signal, a sign that something important was stirring. The Buddha himself, before his awakening, sat with nights just like this. His mind surfaced every belief, every fear, every craving, not to punish him, but to prepare him. What if your mind is doing the same? Think about it. During the day, your thoughts are drowned out by noise, emails, conversations, traffic, social media, the endless list of things to get done. But in the deep hours of the night, when the world is quiet, there's nothing left to distract you from yourself. That's when you finally hear the unfiltered version of your mind. That's when you notice what's been running in the background all along, and the old Buddhist masters would say, this is the moment to pay attention, not to panic, not to force silence, but to see clearly what your mind is doing. Now, I know what you might be thinking, pay attention at 3 in the morning, when all you want is to sleep. But here's the thing, wrestling your mind into quiet usually makes it louder. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the more it wants to pop up. So instead of fighting, what if you got curious? You could start by asking, what exactly is my mind trying to solve right now? Why does it think this is urgent? What am I feeling in my body while these thoughts run? You're not interrogating yourself, you're exploring, the way you might explore a city at night, walking slowly, noticing the details, letting yourself be surprised. Here's where it gets interesting. Often, the 3 a.m. mind isn't really about the things it's obsessing over. The unpaid bill, the awkward conversation, the unfinished project, they're just ripples on the surface. Beneath them is a deeper current, a quiet question. Am I okay? Am I on the right path? The Buddhists have a word for this undercurrent: dukkha. It's not quite suffering as we usually think of it. It's more like a constant hum of dissatisfaction, the sense that something is slightly off. When it shows up at night, most people try to push it away. But that's when it's easiest to see. In the dark, with no distractions, you can look directly at it. One Zen teacher described it like this: your mind is knocking on the door. You can pretend you're not home, or you can open it and see who's there. And when you open it, you might discover that your mind isn't a thief trying to steal your peace, it's a messenger trying to hand you something you've been avoiding. Sometimes it's a realization about how you're living. Sometimes it's an emotion you never fully processed. Sometimes it's a desire you've been afraid to name. Whatever it is, noticing it without judgment changes everything. You're no longer trapped inside your thoughts, you're standing outside them, watching. So here's something to try the next time your mind won't stop talking in the dark. First, acknowledge it. Say, "Okay, mind, I hear you." Then, listen without trying to fix anything. Let the thoughts come and go like cars passing on a street. Shift your focus from what the thought is about to how it moves. Is it fast, repetitive, heavy, light? Check in with your body. Where's the tension? Can you soften there, even a little? And finally, end with kindness. Whether you fall asleep or not, thank your mind for trying to help, even if its timing is questionable. The irony is that when you stop fighting the 3 a.m. mind, it often settles down on its own. Just like a child who calms once they feel heard, your mind relaxes when you listen to it. And if it doesn't, then you've spent an hour practicing awareness, and that's never wasted. Because peace doesn't mean having no thoughts. Peace means knowing you are more than your thoughts. So the next time you find yourself awake in the small hours, remember, this might not be the night your mind betrays you. It might be the night it brings you home. What if the very thing keeping you from the peace you've been searching for isn't that you don't know enough, but that you know too much? What if the mind you've been trying to fill with answers is already so full that there's no space left for anything new to enter? The Japanese have a beautiful phrase for this, shoshin, beginner's mind. Imagine walking into your favorite coffee shop on a winter morning, holding a paper cup already filled to the brim. The coffee is hot, dark, and right up to the edge. Now imagine someone trying to pour in cream or sugar or a little extra flavor. It doesn't matter how good it is, it spills everywhere. There's simply no room. Our minds work the same way. When they're packed with assumptions, opinions, and fixed ideas about who we are and how life should be, there's no space left for the freshness of the present moment. We keep trying to add peace or clarity to a mental cup that's already overflowing with what we think we know. The Buddha understood this deeply. Before his awakening, he spent years chasing perfection, trying to become the ideal seeker, following strict disciplines, mastering spiritual practices. But the harder he tried, the farther away peace seemed to drift. Only when he loosened his grip and allowed himself to be surprised did things begin to change. Think about the last time you learned something completely new. Maybe it was fixing a leaky faucet for the first time, or learning a few phrases in a foreign language before a trip, or figuring out how to navigate an unfamiliar subway system. In those moments, you weren't pretending to be an expert. You weren't performing for anyone. You were just there, curious, open, willing to be wrong. That's beginner's mind. That's the space where peace can actually enter. But here's the catch. Most of us build up certainty like armor. We collect beliefs, strategies, and self-definitions to protect ourselves from the unpredictability of life. At first, that armor feels safe, but over time, it becomes heavy. It stops us from moving freely. It stops us from seeing clearly. Beginner's mind is about taking off the armor. It's the humility to say, I think I understand, but I'm willing to be surprised. It's letting go of the idea that you have to always know what's coming next. When you approach your restless thoughts with curiosity instead of judgment, something changes. You stop fighting them as enemies and start meeting them as teachers. In Zen, there's a saying, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." The expert walks into a room already sure of what they'll see, so they only notice what fits their expectations. The beginner walks in empty, so everything is fresh. The beginner notices the light coming through the window, the sound of footsteps down the hall, the subtle change in someone's tone of voice. They see what's actually there, not just what they expect. And this doesn't mean being naive or pretending you don't know things you've learned. It means holding what you know lightly, like a bird in the palm of your hand, not gripping it so tightly that it can't breathe. Life is too vast, too alive, to be fully understood from any single perspective. Beginner's mind is what allows you to meet it as it is, not as you demand it to be. The next time you feel anxious, try this. Instead of telling yourself, "I shouldn't feel this way," pause and think, "This is here. I wonder what it has to tell me." Instead of deciding you already know what someone is going to say, listen as if you've never heard them before. Instead of assuming you know how today will unfold, step into it like a traveler arriving in a new city, alert to every sight, sound, and smell. When you live from beginner's mind, peace doesn't have to be chased. It comes naturally, because you're no longer filling your mental cup with what you think it should contain. You've left space for life to pour something unexpected into it, and often, what it pours is exactly what you've been longing for all along. What if the very act of chasing peace is the thing keeping it out of reach? It's a strange thought, isn't it? We live in a culture that tells us if we want something badly enough, we should go after it with everything we've got. Work harder, try longer, push through. And yet, when it comes to peace of mind, that strategy often backfires. Picture this. You're standing at the edge of a calm lake, watching the surface reflect the sky. You want to capture that stillness, so you reach in with your hands, trying to hold it. The moment you touch the water, ripples spread out, and the reflection is gone. In the same way, the harder we grasp for peace, the more disturbed the surface of our mind becomes. The Buddha learned this lesson firsthand. Before his awakening, he tried every method to control his mind: rigid discipline, extreme fasting, constant meditation, but the harder he pushed, the more restless his mind grew. It wasn't until he stopped straining and let go of the idea of getting somewhere that the stillness he was seeking naturally appeared. The problem with chasing peace is that it turns peace into a goal, and the moment peace becomes a goal, it slips out of the present moment and into the future. You start telling yourself, "I'll be at peace when I finish this project, when I fix this relationship, when I learn to meditate perfectly." But peace doesn't live in the future, it only exists now. And every time you make it a destination, you postpone it. It's like trying to remember a name that's on the tip of your tongue. You strain and strain, but the more you push, the further away it feels. Then, the moment you stop trying, it just appears. That's how peace works. You can't force it, but you can create the conditions for it to arise. One of the simplest ways to do this is to stop demanding that the present moment be different than it is. That doesn't mean you resign yourself to every situation forever. It means that, in this moment, you stop adding the extra layer of "this shouldn't be happening" on top of what's already happening. You feel the tension in your shoulders, and instead of saying, "I need to get rid of this right now," you simply acknowledge it. Tension is here. Ironically, it's that acknowledgement without resistance that often softens the tension on its own. Just like a guest who leaves sooner when they're welcomed, difficult emotions often pass more quickly when you stop slamming the door in their face. Peace isn't something you win by force, it's something you uncover by removing what's blocking it. And most of the time, what's blocking it is the belief that you have to chase it. The mind that is running after peace is a mind that isn't peaceful, but the mind that's willing to sit still just for this breath, just for this moment, is already touching peace. So the next time you find yourself trying to get calm, pause. Notice the part of you that's chasing. See if you can let it take a step back. Let your thoughts and feelings be what they are, without needing them to change. You might be surprised to find that the peace you've been running toward has been sitting beside you all along, waiting for you to stop running. Anxiety has a way of shrinking the world. When it hits, everything narrows down to the rapid beat of your heart, the restless churn of your thoughts, the tightening in your chest. It feels like you're trapped in a small, airless room with no way out. Our first instinct is almost always the same: get rid of it, push it away, fight it until it disappears. But what if the way out isn't to fight harder? What if the way out is to get curious? Curiosity changes the texture of anxiety. Instead of being the helpless subject of an overwhelming force, you become the observer, the investigator. You step out of the cramped room and start looking around. You ask questions not in a frantic, "How do I stop this?" way, but in a gentle, "What's going on here?" way. And those questions shift everything. The next time anxiety rises, you might start with something as simple as, "Where do I feel this most in my body? Is it in your stomach, your shoulders, your jaw?" As you notice, you give yourself a little space. You're no longer just in the anxiety, you're watching it. Then you might ask, if this feeling had a color, what would it be? If it had a shape, what shape would it take? These sound like odd questions, but they work because they shift your brain from reactivity into exploration. You're engaging different neural pathways, ones that don't fuel the panic spiral. This is the essence of what the Buddha and countless teachers after him have encouraged: meeting your mind with interest instead of resistance. When you lean in with curiosity, you discover that anxiety isn't a monolith. It's not one solid, immovable thing. It's made up of sensations, thoughts, images, each of which changes if you simply stay with it long enough. And here's the surprising thing: curiosity has a calming effect even before anything resolves. Just the act of asking questions without expecting answers signals to your nervous system that you're safe enough to explore. It's the opposite of the fight or flight message that anxiety sends. Think about a time you met someone new and were genuinely interested in their story. You leaned forward, asked them about their life, listened closely. Curiosity pulled you out of yourself and into connection. You can turn that same energy inward. You can become interested in your own inner world. When you meet anxiety with curiosity, you may even start to notice patterns. Maybe certain thoughts always show up with the same knot in your stomach. Maybe anxiety tends to rise at the same time of day or in certain environments. This isn't about finding a magic bullet. It's about understanding your mind the way you'd understand a close friend. And as you build that relationship, something changes. Anxiety stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like information. It becomes a messenger, alerting you to something that needs your attention, not something to be destroyed, but something to be understood. Curiosity doesn't mean you'll never feel anxious again. It means that when anxiety visits, you'll know how to greet it at the door, sit it down at the table, and listen for what it has to say. And often, that's all it needs before it quietly takes its leave. We spend so much of life searching for clarity, for meaning, for a sense of home in our own skin. We chase new experiences, new achievements, new answers, believing that the right one will finally settle the restless feeling inside. But here's a question. What if the thing you've been searching for isn't out there at all? What if it's already here, waiting for you to make space for it? Imagine walking into a cluttered room where every surface is covered tables stacked with old magazines, counters full of dishes, chairs draped with clothes. You know there's a beautiful piece of furniture in the corner, but you can't see it because everything else is in the way. The only way to appreciate it is to clear the space. Our inner world works the same way. Peace, clarity, connection, they aren't things we need to import from outside. They're already here, like the furniture under the clutter. But when our minds are crowded with constant noise plans, judgments, replayed arguments, imagined futures, there's no room to notice them. The mistake we make is thinking we have to add something to our lives to find peace. A better job, a perfect relationship, the right routine, a more disciplined meditation practice. But often, the real work is subtraction, removing what's in the way, letting go of mental habits that fill all the empty spaces before they can show us what's been here all along. Making space doesn't mean quitting your life or retreating to a mountaintop. It can be as simple as pausing before you check your phone in the morning, giving yourself 30 seconds of unfilled time. It can mean going for a walk without headphones, letting the sounds of the world be your company. It can mean saying no to an obligation that drains you, leaving an evening open with no plan at all. These small acts create openings, and in those openings, you start to notice things that were invisible before. The way the light moves across your kitchen in the late afternoon, the sound of your own breath slowing when you finally stop rushing, the relief in your body when you give yourself permission not to fill every moment with doing. The truth is, what you've been seeking often doesn't arrive with a grand announcement. It slips in quietly when there's enough space for it to land. And the more you practice making that space clearing the clutter, both inner and outer, the more you realize that peace was never far away. It was simply waiting for an invitation. So instead of asking, how do I find what I'm looking for? Maybe the better question is, what can I put down so it can find me? That's how you stop chasing and start receiving. And often, that's when you discover that what you've been seeking has been here the whole time, patient, steady, and ready to meet you the moment you make room. Imagine someone handed you a map, not to a buried treasure chest filled with gold, but to something far rarer, unshakable peace, a sense of home within yourself, and clarity about who you really are. Over 1,000 years ago, Zen masters created just such a map. They called it the 10 Bulls. At first glance, it looks like a simple sequence of drawings, a person searching for, finding, taming, and finally transcending a bull. But the bull isn't an animal wandering through grassy fields. It's a symbol for your true nature, your deepest, most authentic self. The map begins with a familiar feeling, the ache that something is missing. This is stage 1, searching for the bull. You might recognize it as those moments when life feels like it's happening somewhere else, as if you're watching from the outside. You can't quite put your finger on it, but you know there must be more than this. The Buddha knew this stage well. Before his awakening, he wandered in search of a truth he couldn't yet name. Stage 2 is seeing the tracks. These are glimpses, fleeting but unmistakable, that what you seek is real. A sudden moment of calm while walking your dog, a quiet contentment while sitting in the car watching the rain. They're the footprints of the bull, proof that it's out there, or rather, in here. Stage 3 is first glimpse of the bull. This is when you see something real, but the harder you try to hold on to it, the faster it fades. Like trying to remember a name on the tip of your tongue, it's there until you reach for it. Then it's gone. In stage 4, catching the bull, you've had enough glimpses to believe in it fully, but bringing it into your daily life feels like trying to hold water in your hands. You might be peaceful while meditating, then lose it instantly in traffic or during a tense meeting. This is where many people get discouraged, but the ancient masters would say this is part of the work, learning to carry peace into the noise. Stage 5 is taming the bull. Here, you begin to see your patterns clearly. You notice irritation rising before it turns into an argument. You catch your mind spiraling into worry and gently guide it back. The bull is still strong-willed, but it's beginning to trust you. The journey doesn't end there. It moves into stage 6, riding the bull, and beyond. But for now, just knowing these first steps is enough. Because here's the secret the Zen masters built into the map. You're not just looking for the bull, you're learning about yourself through every step you take. And the more you understand that, the more you realize that the real treasure isn't at the end of the path, it's in the walking. Stage 1, searching for the bull, begins with a restlessness you can't quite name. It's the quiet feeling that something essential is missing, that life as you're living it is somehow incomplete. You go through your daily routines, answering emails, making small talk, checking items off your to-do list, and yet, beneath it all, there's a persistent hum of dissatisfaction. You might try to drown it out with work, relationships, entertainment, or endless scrolling, but it never truly disappears. The Zen masters knew this feeling intimately. They saw it not as a problem, but as the first sign of awakening, a signal that you're ready to begin the search. Without that longing, you'd never set out on the path at all. Stage 2 is seeing the tracks. Here, the search starts to bear fruit in small but undeniable ways. Maybe you experience a moment of stillness while sipping your morning coffee, or a sudden clarity while walking alone in the park. These moments are the footprints of your true nature. They don't last long, but they hint at something real, something worth following. The temptation is to dismiss them as accidents, but the wise approach is to pay attention. These glimpses are proof that the bull exists, and that you're heading in the right direction. Stage 3, first glimpse of the bull, is both exhilarating and frustrating. You might have a deep, peaceful meditation, or a flash of insight that feels absolutely clear in the moment. You think, this is it, I've found it. But as soon as you try to hold on to it, it slips away. It's like trying to catch a reflection in a moving stream. The harder you grasp, the more it dissolves. The lesson here is humility. Peace and clarity can't be captured or stored away. They can only be met, moment by moment. Stage 4 is catching the bull. Now you know without doubt that what you're looking for is real. You've seen it, you've felt it, and you believe in it fully. But bringing it into daily life is another matter entirely. You might be calm and centered during your morning meditation, only to lose that calm when a co-worker interrupts you or when you're stuck behind a slow driver. This is where discipline and patience are essential. You're learning to stay connected even when life pushes and pulls you in every direction. Stage 5, taming the bull, is where you begin to see real change. You start recognizing your triggers before they take over. You notice the rise of irritation or fear, and instead of reacting automatically, you pause. You choose a different response. The bull, your restless, reactive mind, still tests you, but it no longer runs wild. You've built enough trust with it, enough skill in guiding it, that moments of peace begin to appear more often and stay longer. These first 5 stages are about building the foundation. They're not about reaching perfection or living in constant peace. They're about learning to see, to recognize, and to work with your own mind. Every step, every track, every fleeting glimpse brings you closer to a relationship with yourself that's based not on control, but on understanding. And in the end, that understanding is the only real way to guide the bull. Stage 6, riding the bull, is when the struggle begins to ease. You're no longer chasing the bull, no longer tugging desperately at the rope to keep it from running off. Now you move together, side by side, in a kind of unspoken rhythm. In practical terms, this might look like returning to your center more naturally throughout the day, without forcing it. You can be in the middle of a busy work meeting, stuck in traffic, or cooking dinner for your family, and still feel that quiet thread of presence running through everything. Life hasn't gotten any less chaotic, but you're riding it with more balance. You're no longer just surviving the ride, you're starting to enjoy it. Stage 7, bull transcended, brings an even stranger shift. You suddenly realize the bull was never separate from you in the first place. All that time you thought you were chasing something out there, but it was here all along, woven into your very being. This realization can feel disorienting. You've been searching for so long that to discover there's nothing to catch can leave you momentarily unmoored. But then relief sets in, because if it was never separate, it was never truly lost. Stage 8, both bull and self transcended, goes even further. Not only is there no bull to chase, but the you who was chasing dissolves as well. This isn't an erasure of your personality or your life. It's the dropping away of the illusion that you're a fixed, separate self who has to defend and define itself at all costs. Experience flows more freely here. Joy, sadness, frustration, gratitude, they come and go like clouds in a vast sky, and the sky is untouched by any of them. Stage 9, returning to the origin, is quiet and unassuming. There are no fireworks, no grand declarations of enlightenment. You return to ordinary life, but everything is infused with the understanding you've gained. Washing the dishes, walking the dog, greeting a neighbor, these simple acts are enough. You no longer search for meaning in extraordinary experiences, because you see the extraordinary in the ordinary. Stage 10, entering the marketplace with helping hands, is the natural expression of this journey. You don't retreat from the world to keep your peace intact. You bring your peace into the world. You help others, not because you feel obligated, but because it overflows naturally from you. Sometimes this help is visible teaching, guiding, offering support. More often, it's invisible, like the calm presence that makes others breathe easier without knowing why. These final stages aren't about arriving at some perfect endpoint. They're about realizing there was never a finish line, only a deepening relationship with life as it is. From riding the bull to transcending it, from dissolving into the sky to returning to the marketplace, the whole journey is about discovering that what you've been seeking has always been here, quiet, patient, waiting for you to notice. Progress on any inner journey rarely moves in a straight line. We like to imagine it will. Step 1 leads to step 2, which leads to step 3, until one day we cross a clear finish line and say, "There, I've made it." But the truth, especially in the spiritual life, is far less tidy. It's not a straight path up a mountain. It's more like a spiral staircase. You keep circling around, revisiting places you've been before, yet somehow, each time, you're seeing them from a higher vantage point. In practice, this means you might have moments of profound clarity, followed days later by the return of old habits or familiar doubts. It can feel discouraging, as if you've lost everything you worked so hard for. But in reality, you haven't gone backward, you've just returned to a lesson at a deeper level. You bring with you all the insight and experience you've gained since the last time you were here. Imagine meeting an old challenge, say, a conflict at work or a recurring pattern in your relationships. Years ago, it might have left you shaken for days. Now, it still bothers you, but you catch yourself reacting differently. You pause before speaking. You see the situation with more perspective. You feel the sting, but it doesn't consume you the way it once did. That's the spiral in action. Same situation, different you. The Buddha spoke of this not as failure, but as the natural rhythm of awakening. Life keeps presenting the same themes, not to trap you, but to give you another chance to respond with more wisdom, more compassion. Think of it as life's curriculum. If you didn't fully absorb a lesson, it returns not as punishment, but as an opportunity. This spiral nature of growth also means that apparent setbacks are often just part of the pattern. A sudden flare of anger after months of calm doesn't mean you're back at square one. It might be that you're now ready to see a deeper layer of that anger, one you couldn't face before. The path wins, but it still moves forward. When you accept that growth is cyclical, you stop rushing to finish it. You become more patient with yourself. You understand that revisiting old ground is part of the design. And slowly, you see that the spiral doesn't just take you upward, it also takes you inward, toward the center you've been circling all along. The 10 bulls may look like an ancient Zen diagram hanging on a temple wall, but it was never meant to stay there. A map is only useful if you take it into the territory, and the territory is your everyday life. The point isn't to memorize the stages or to tick them off like items on a checklist. It's to let the spirit of each stage meet you where you are, in real time, with real challenges. You might find yourself in stage 1, searching for the bull, while sitting in traffic, feeling the gnawing sense that life is happening somewhere else. In that moment, you don't need to wait for a meditation cushion or a retreat. You can simply acknowledge the restlessness. That act alone is part of the search. Or maybe you're in stage 2, seeing the tracks, while sipping your coffee in the early morning light, and there's a brief, unforced quiet. Recognize it. Let it register in your body. This is proof the bull is near. Stage 3. first glimpse might come in the middle of a busy workday when, for a split second, everything feels aligned. You don't have to hold on to it. In fact, you can't, but you can appreciate it without clutching. Stage 4, catching the bull, could happen during a tense conversation. You sense the possibility of staying calm, but your emotions pull you toward reaction. This is your practice ground. You catch the bull not by overpowering it, but by staying present. Stage 5, taming the bull, unfolds over time. It's in the moments you choose to respond differently than you once would have, pausing instead of snapping, breathing instead of spiraling. The later stages, too, can be lived in small, ordinary ways. Riding the bull might be simply moving through your day with a quiet thread of presence running beneath everything you do. Returning to the origin might be doing the dishes without wishing you were somewhere else. Entering the marketplace could be showing up to a conversation with your full attention, making the other person feel seen. The truth is, the 10 bulls aren't a ladder you climb once and leave behind. They're more like a set of lenses, each one helping you see a different facet of your own nature. Some days you might move through several stages before lunch. Other days you might feel stuck in the same one for weeks. That's okay. Bringing the map into daily life means letting it remind you that awakening isn't separate from the mess, the noise, the routines, the relationships. It's right here, in how you greet your morning, how you handle frustration, how you notice a moment of beauty without rushing past it. The bull is always with you. The only question is whether you're willing to look up from the road long enough to see it. Every experience you've ever had has left a trace, not just in your memory, but in the way you think, feel, and respond to the world. In Buddhist psychology, these traces are called samskaras, mental impressions or imprints that shape how your mind moves, often without you realizing it. They're like footprints on a well-worn path through a field. The first time you step there, the grass bends slightly. The second time, it bends a little more. Keep walking the same route, and soon a visible trail appears. Eventually, it becomes the path you automatically take, simply because it's the most familiar. This is why certain situations trigger you instantly, even when you know better. A critical comment from a coworker might send you straight back to feeling like the awkward kid in middle school. An unanswered text might stir up the same fear of abandonment you felt years ago in a breakup. Your reaction in the present is amplified by grooves carved deep in the past. Samskaras aren't inherently bad. They're simply the result of repetition of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors practiced over time. Some are helpful. The instinct to look both ways before crossing the street. The habit of saying thank you when someone holds the door. Others keep you trapped. The reflex to assume the worst, the tendency to shut down when conflict arises. The key is realizing that samskaras are not fixed. They feel automatic, but they can be changed. Imagine fresh snow covering that field again. Suddenly the old trail is gone, and you have a chance to walk in a new direction. Every moment of awareness is like fresh snow. It gives you the opportunity to choose a different path. The work begins with seeing the patterns clearly. That's not always comfortable. It's easier to believe you're reacting purely to the present than to admit you're being pulled by echoes of the past. But once you see the track, you can decide whether to keep following it. Changing a samskara isn't about brute force. It's about gentle, consistent redirection. Every time you notice the old habit starting and choose differently, you weaken that groove. Every time you nurture a new habit responding with curiosity instead of defensiveness, compassion instead of judgment, you deepen a fresh groove. Over time, the new path becomes the one your mind naturally takes. And here's something important. Awareness alone is progress. Even if you still follow the old path sometimes, the fact that you see it means you're no longer walking it blindly. That moment of recognition is the first and most crucial step toward freedom. Habits of mind are rarely born in a single moment. They develop quietly, layer by layer, until they feel as natural as breathing. Most begin with a single experience that leaves a mark, sometimes subtle, sometimes seismic. If the experience is repeated, or if it's charged with strong emotion, the mark deepens. Over time, those marks connect, forming patterns that your mind comes to rely on as shortcuts. Imagine you touch a hot stove as a child. The pain is sharp and immediate, and your body learns a lesson in an instant. Don't touch. That's a helpful habit of mind, a pattern designed to keep you safe. But not all patterns are so simple or so beneficial. Perhaps as a child you were scolded harshly when you spoke up. The sting of embarrassment imprints itself. Next time you have something to say, you hesitate. Eventually, hesitation becomes silence, and silence becomes a reflex that's hard to break. This is the core of habit formation in the mind. Repetition plus emotional weight. A neutral event repeated often enough can become automatic, like checking your phone when you wake up. An emotionally charged event, even if it happens once, can carve a deep channel in your nervous system. The mind doesn't distinguish between good and bad in this process. It only notes what seems important for survival, belonging, or avoiding pain. Modern neuroscience tells us that neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you think a certain thought or react in a certain way, you strengthen the neural pathway that supports it. It's like pouring water down the same groove in sand over and over. The groove gets deeper, making it even more likely the next flow will follow it. This is why habits of mind can feel so stubborn. You're not just dealing with ideas, you're working with pathways that have been reinforced for years, maybe decades. And yet, the same principle that formed them can unform them. Neurons can rewire, the grooves can fill in, new ones can be carved. The challenge is that the brain loves efficiency. It will choose the familiar path, even if that path leads to stress, anxiety, or conflict. It's easier in the short term to react than to pause and choose differently. That's why awareness is the first and most powerful disruptor. When you catch yourself in the moment feeling the tug of the old habit, you create a space in which a new choice is possible. Over time, with consistent practice, the brain begins to prefer the new path. At first, it takes effort reminding yourself to breathe before responding, to question the fearful thought instead of believing it. But with repetition, the effort eases, and the new habit begins to feel just as natural as the old one once did. Habits of mind are not destiny. They are learned, which means they can be unlearned. And every small interruption in an old pattern is not just a pause, it's the planting of a seed for something new to grow. Rewiring the brain through awareness is less about forcing change and more about creating the conditions in which change can naturally happen. The brain is not a fixed machine, it's a living, dynamic network of connections that reorganizes itself throughout your life. This ability, known as neuroplasticity, is the reason awareness has such transformative power. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, every action you take, sends signals through particular neural pathways. The more often a pathway is used, the stronger and faster it becomes, like a trail through the woods that gets clearer and easier to follow the more people walk it. Old habits of mind are simply well-worn trails, carved by years of repetition. Awareness is like stepping off that familiar trail and pausing long enough to see where else you might go. In that pause, something remarkable happens. The automatic response is interrupted. Instead of immediately reacting out of anger, fear, or habit, you create a moment of choice. And in that moment, you have the power to direct your mind down a different path. This is why mindfulness practices are so effective. When you bring full attention to what you're experiencing, your breath, the sensations in your body, the thoughts moving through your mind, you're training yourself to notice without immediately reacting. That simple noticing begins to weaken the old pathways, because you're no longer reinforcing them every time the trigger arises. At the same time, when you consciously choose a new response, pausing instead of snapping at someone, breathing instead of panicking, you're beginning to carve out an alternative route in your brain. The more often you choose this new route, the more established it becomes. Over weeks, months, and years, the brain starts to favor it, just as it once favored the old habit. It's important to understand that rewiring the brain doesn't mean erasing old patterns completely. Some triggers might still light up the old pathways, especially in moments of stress. But with practice, your new pathways become strong enough that you can notice the old reaction without being pulled into it. The trigger appears, but instead of being swept away, you can watch it come and go, like a cloud passing through a clear sky. And here's where awareness works its quiet magic. Each time you catch yourself before falling into an old pattern, you reinforce your capacity to choose differently. Each moment of noticing is both the practice and the result. Over time, this builds a kind of trust in yourself, a trust that no matter what arises in your mind, you have the space and the skill to meet it with clarity. Rewiring the brain through awareness is not a dramatic, overnight transformation. It's a steady, patient process of returning again and again to the present moment, choosing the path you want to strengthen. Little by little, you change not just your reactions, but the very structure of your mind. Building positive mental grooves begins with recognizing that your mind is constantly shaping itself according to what you give your attention to. Every thought you dwell on, every feeling you linger with, every action you repeat is like a drop of water carving into stone. Over time, these drops form channels, some that lead to stress and reactivity, and others that lead to calm, clarity, and resilience. The good news is that you can choose which channels you deepen. The process starts with awareness, but awareness alone isn't enough. You also have to feed the mind what you want it to grow. Think of your attention as sunlight. Whatever you shine it on, you nourish. If you continually place your focus on fear, criticism, and scarcity, those are the mental grooves that will deepen. If you place it on gratitude, kindness, and trust, those grooves will take shape instead. Gratitude is one of the most effective tools for building positive grooves. It's not about ignoring life's difficulties. It's about training your mind to also notice what's good and sustaining. You can start small. Each night, write down 3 things you appreciated that day, no matter how simple: a warm cup of coffee, a smile from a stranger, the way sunlight moved across your living room floor. This repetition teaches your brain to scan for positives, not just threats. Kindness works the same way. Each time you offer compassion to yourself or to others, you're strengthening the neural pathways for empathy and connection. These pathways are like bridges between you and the rest of the world. The more you cross them, the sturdier they become, until kindness is less an effort and more a natural response. Another way to build positive grooves is through savoring. Too often, we rush past pleasant moments without letting them register. The brain is wired with a negativity bias. It tends to give more weight to potential dangers than to fleeting joys. Savoring counters that bias by lingering with what feels good. When something pleasant happens, pause. Notice it fully. Let it fill your senses. Even holding that feeling for just 10 or 15 seconds can begin to carve a groove toward greater well-being. Repetition is key. The mind changes through consistent practice, not occasional inspiration. Every time you choose to bring your attention back to something nourishing, you're strengthening a pattern. And over time, these patterns don't just change how you feel, they change how you see the world. You begin to notice opportunities instead of obstacles, connection instead of separation, possibility instead of limitation. Positive mental grooves aren't about denying pain or pretending everything is fine. They're about balancing your mental landscape so that difficulty isn't the only path your mind knows how to travel. You still meet challenges, but you do so with resources you've built through practice, resources that are ready and available because you've walked those paths so many times, they've become second nature. Compassion for yourself and others begins with a simple but often uncomfortable truth. You are not the only one carrying unseen burdens. Everyone you meet is navigating their own web of struggles, fears, and disappointments, many of which you will never know. Remembering this doesn't minimize your own pain, it places it in a shared human context. And that shared context is where compassion grows. For most of us, the hardest part of compassion is turning it inward. We've been taught to be our own harshest critics, as if constant self-judgment will somehow push us toward improvement. But in reality, that inner harshness often reinforces the very patterns we're trying to change. Self-compassion is not about letting yourself off the hook. It's about replacing shame with understanding so that change becomes possible without the weight of self-hatred. Practicing self-compassion can be as simple as noticing when you're speaking to yourself in ways you would never speak to a friend. You make a mistake, and your mind immediately says, "I'm such an idiot." In that moment, pause. Replace it with the kind of voice you'd offer someone you love. "I made a mistake, but I'm learning. I can try again." It might feel awkward at first, even insincere, but over time this gentler inner voice becomes more natural. You're carving a new groove in the mind, one that supports growth instead of sabotaging it. Extending compassion to others works in much the same way. Instead of reacting only to the surface of someone's behavior, you begin to look for what might be driving it. The coworker who snapped at you might be dealing with a sleepless night caring for a sick child. The stranger who cut you off in traffic might be on their way to an emergency. This doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it helps you meet it without adding unnecessary hostility to the world. Compassion doesn't mean becoming a doormat or ignoring harm. Healthy compassion includes boundaries. You can recognize someone's pain and still say no to behavior that crosses a line. In fact, clear boundaries are a form of compassion, both for you and for the other person. because they create the conditions for healthier interactions in the future. The more you practice compassion, the more you realize it's not a finite resource. It doesn't run out when you give it away. In fact, the opposite happens. The more you offer it, the more it grows. Each act of compassion reinforces the mental pathways that make the next act easier. And the impact is not just internal. Compassion is contagious. A small kindness, a patient tone, a listening ear, a moment of grace can ripple outward in ways you'll never fully see. Ultimately, compassion for yourself and others comes from the same source, the understanding that we are all works in progress. We are all shaped by our histories, our habits, and our hopes. When you look through that lens, judgment softens, connection deepens, and the grooves you carve in your own mind begin to shape a gentler world around you. Emptiness is one of those words that can stop people cold. In everyday language, it sounds bleak, like a hollow room or a life without meaning. But in the language of Buddhist teaching, emptiness is anything but hopeless. It's spaciousness, it's freedom, it's the wide open sky. Imagine lying on your back in a field on a clear day, watching the clouds drift by. They take on shapes, animals, faces, castles, and then dissolve into something else. Sometimes the sky is full of them, sometimes it's perfectly clear. But no matter what moves through it, the sky itself remains untouched. That's what emptiness points to. The recognition that everything, your thoughts, your emotions, your problems, is like those clouds. They arise, they change, they pass. None of them are as solid as they appear. We suffer when we mistake the clouds for the sky. We cling to a joyful moment as if it could last forever, or we resist a painful one as if it will never end. We build our identities around temporary conditions, forgetting that the core of who we are is vast, open, and not limited by any single experience. Emptiness doesn't mean nothing exists. It means nothing exists in a fixed, unchanging way. Think about anger. In the heat of it, it feels like a solid, immovable wall. But if you pay close attention, you see it's not a single thing. It's a rapid series of sensations, thoughts, and physical reactions. The rush of heat in your chest, the tightening of your jaw, the story playing in your mind about what just happened. Like a storm, anger gathers, peaks, and eventually disperses. Its solidity is an illusion. The same is true for joy, anxiety, grief, any state of mind. When you see their empty nature, you can experience them fully without getting trapped in them. Joy can be savored without clinging. Grief can be felt without believing it will consume you forever. Anxiety can be noticed without building your entire identity around it. And this recognition extends beyond your inner life. The people you meet, the situations you face, they too are fluid. Someone who frustrates you today might surprise you with kindness tomorrow. A challenge that seems like a dead end could open a path you didn't expect. Emptiness reminds you not to freeze the world into fixed judgments, because nothing and no one is ever just one thing. When you live with this understanding, the grip of fear and attachment loosens. You stop trying to control every cloud in the sky and instead start appreciating the sky itself. And in that vast, open space, you find a kind of peace that doesn't depend on the weather. Samsara is the word Buddhism uses for the endless cycle of experiences that make up our lives, the repeating patterns of pleasure and pain, gain and loss, hope and disappointment. It's not a place, but a way of moving through the world, caught in the momentum of habit. Most people think of samsara as something to escape, like a prison. But the old teachers saw it differently. They saw it as our most persistent, patient teacher, returning again and again with the same lessons until we truly understand them. You've probably felt samsara at work in your own life. Maybe you notice you keep ending up in the same kind of relationship, even though you promised yourself you'd never repeat that pattern. Or maybe the same frustration keeps surfacing at work, just with different co-workers or new projects. On the surface, the circumstances change, but underneath, it's the same cycle playing out. When you're caught inside it, samsara feels exhausting. You might think, why does this keep happening to me? But if you shift the question to, what is this trying to teach me? The experience changes. Suddenly, the cycle isn't just something to endure, it's a curriculum. The people and situations that keep showing up are the ones with the most to teach you, if you're willing to pay attention. The Buddha described samsara using the image of a wheel. The wheel turns because it's driven by our attachments and aversions, our grasping for what we want, and our resistance to what we don't. Every time we react without awareness, we give the wheel another push. But when we start to see the patterns clearly, we can stop adding so much momentum. Riding the wheel skillfully doesn't mean you never face difficulties again. It means you learn how to keep your balance when the wheel turns. You stop making things harder by shooting yourself with what the Buddha called the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain that life inevitably brings: loss, illness, conflict. The second arrow is the story we tell ourselves about that pain. This shouldn't be happening. I can't handle this. My life is ruined. The second arrow is optional. When you stop adding it, you realize you can face far more than you thought. You can feel sadness without becoming despair. You can experience uncertainty without collapsing into anxiety. You can face change without being shattered by it. And here's the gift of samsara. The same cycles that once trapped you can become your training ground. Every turn of the wheel gives you another chance to practice patience, compassion, and awareness. And every time you stay balanced a little longer, respond a little more wisely, you weaken the old momentum and make space for something new. Mara is the name Buddhist tradition gives to that inner force that shows up just when you're on the verge of something important. It's the voice that whispers, "Who do you think you are? You're not ready. This won't work. Why bother trying?" Mara's job is to keep you in the familiar, even if the familiar is uncomfortable. The Buddha met Mara on the night of his enlightenment. As he sat beneath the Bodhi tree, Mara arrived with his full arsenal: visions meant to distract, temptations meant to derail, fears meant to send him running. But instead of fighting or fleeing, the Buddha simply said, "I see you, Mara." And in that recognition, Mara lost his power. That's the key. Mara feeds on invisibility. As long as you mistake his voice for truth, he can steer you. But the moment you recognize him, the spell breaks. This recognition doesn't mean Mara disappears forever. He came back to visit the Buddha many times, but each time, the Buddha greeted him like an old acquaintance rather than an enemy. Mara doesn't always arrive with the obvious punch of self-doubt. Sometimes he dresses up as practical advice. Better play it safe. Don't aim too high. People might laugh. Other times he comes as fear of loss, fear of failure, or even pride, convincing you that you've already done enough and don't need to keep growing. The trick is to notice the energy behind the thought. Is it expansive or is it constricting? Does it make you feel more open and capable, or smaller and shut down? That's one way to spot Mara. His words always carry the flavor of limitation. When you catch him in the act, try doing what the Buddha did. Acknowledge him without hostility. You might even say inwardly, "Hello, Mara, I know you." Then look at what was happening just before he appeared. Were you about to take a step outside your comfort zone? Were you moving towards something that matters deeply to you? Often, his arrival is a sign that you're heading in the right direction. Over time, meeting Mara with awareness turns him from a saboteur into a kind of strange ally. His presence signals growth. Every time you see him clearly and move forward anyway, you prove to yourself that his voice is not the truth. And that is how you keep walking your path, even when the old fears try to pull you back. Noble silence is not the silence of absence or awkwardness. It's the silence of presence. It's the pause that holds more meaning than words can carry, the space where understanding grows without a single sentence being spoken. In Buddhist tradition, there's a famous story about the layman Vimala Kirti. When asked the deepest question about the nature of reality, he didn't respond with philosophy or poetry. He simply sat in complete, unmoving silence. And in that stillness, everyone present understood. This kind of silence is rare in our world. We rush to fill every pause, to explain, to justify, to prove we're listening by adding more sound. But noble silence invites something different. It invites us to simply be here awake, aware, and unafraid of the space between words. Think about music. The notes are important, but it's the spaces between them that give the melody shape. Without the rests, the music becomes noise. In the same way, the silence between our words gives them weight. A conversation without pauses is like a song without rhythm, relentless, exhausting, and forgettable. Noble silence doesn't mean withdrawing or shutting down. It's not the cold wall of someone refusing to speak. It's an active, alert stillness. When you sit with someone in noble silence, you're fully there with them, listening not just to their words but to their whole presence. You're not preparing your response. You're not waiting for your turn. You're simply sharing the space, letting it speak in ways language can't. You can practice noble silence anywhere. In a meeting, instead of jumping in the moment, there's a pause. Try letting it breathe. With a friend, notice what happens when you don't rush to fill the quiet. Alone, put down your phone and sit without the constant hum of input. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. We're so used to the distraction of sound that silence can feel like something's missing. But given time, you realize silence isn't empty. It's full of sensations, of presence, of life happening in real time. And here's the secret. Noble silence changes the quality of your words when you do speak. When speech rises out of stillness, it carries more clarity, more precision, more care. You're no longer talking just to fill the air. You're saying what's truly needed and nothing more. In a noisy, distracted world, noble silence is a radical act. It's a refusal to add to the static. It's a way of letting the truth emerge on its own, without pushing. And often, in that space, the most important understandings arise not in what is said, but in what is felt. Imagine an infinite net stretching across the universe, with a jewel at every intersection. In each jewel, you can see the reflection of all the other jewels, and in each of those reflections, the reflection of all the others, endlessly. This ancient image from Buddhist tradition is called Indra's net, and it's one of the most powerful ways to understand the nature of reality. In Indra's net, nothing exists in isolation. Every jewel depends on all the others, and every jewel contains all the others in its reflection. You are one of those jewels. Everything you do, say, or even think sends ripples through the web, touching lives you'll never meet. And everything you experience has been shaped, in ways large and small, by countless beings and events that came before you. You can see this truth in something as simple as the air you breathe. The oxygen in your lungs was produced by forests and oceans, by plants that transformed sunlight into life. Every breath ties you to the trees, the sea, and the wind. Or think of the meal you ate today, grown by farmers, transported by drivers, stocked by workers, cooked or prepared, using the knowledge and effort of others. Even the device you're using to read these words is the result of countless hands and minds working together across time and distance. This isn't just poetry, it's reality. Our lives are made up of connections so vast and intricate, we can't possibly track them all. And when you begin to see yourself as part of this web, something shifts. You start to understand that your joys and your struggles aren't yours alone. The anxiety you carry has been felt by countless others. The moments of peace you experience add to a reservoir of peace that others can draw from. Recognizing this connection naturally leads to compassion. How can you harm what you're part of? How can you turn away from someone whose life is woven into your own? And it deepens gratitude as well. Every kindness you receive is the result of a chain of connections reaching back farther than you can see. Indra's net also teaches humility. No single jewel holds the whole net together. You are important, but you are not the center of the universe, and that's liberating. You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders. You just have to tend to your part of the web, knowing that every choice you make sends ripples outward. When you see life through the lens of Indra's net, you stop asking, "What difference can I make?" You understand that you can't help but make a difference. The only question is, what kind of ripples do you want to send? Dependent origination is the Buddha's way of describing one of the most fundamental truths about existence. Nothing arises on its own. Every experience, every thought, every moment is the result of countless causes and conditions coming together. Change even one of those conditions, and the result changes. Think of a wave in the ocean. At first glance, it seems like a separate thing, with its own shape and movement. But a wave doesn't exist independently. It's the product of wind, water, tides, temperature, and gravity all interacting. Alter any one of these, and the wave changes. When the conditions shift enough, the wave disappears, returning to the ocean it never truly left. Our lives work the same way. That burst of anxiety before a meeting, it might be the result of a poor night's sleep, too much caffeine, an unresolved conversation with a friend, and the memory of a time you stumbled over your words in public. None of those factors alone create the anxiety, but together they form the conditions for it to arise. Understanding dependent origination is liberating because it replaces the story of personal failure with a clearer view of reality. You're not broken because you feel what you feel. You're responding to conditions. And if conditions create the experience, then changing the conditions can change the experience. This is where awareness becomes powerful. You start to notice the patterns, how your environment, your habits, And even the people you spend time with influence your mental state. If scrolling through the news late at night leaves you restless, you can change that condition. If walking in nature brings calm, you can create more opportunities for that. It also works in reverse. The conditions you create don't just affect you, they ripple outward. A single kind word can alter the conditions of someone else's day. Your patience in a tense situation can shift the emotional climate for everyone involved. Dependent origination teaches humility too. Just as you are shaped by conditions, so is everyone else. That rude comment from a stranger might be the product of stress, illness, or grief you can't see. This doesn't excuse harm, but it helps you meet it with understanding instead of automatic judgment. Seeing life this way invites a gentler, more skillful approach to change. You stop trying to control outcomes directly and instead focus on influencing the conditions that give rise to them. You learn to plant seeds rather than yank at the sprouts. And perhaps most importantly, dependent origination reminds you that everything is in motion. No joy or sorrow, no challenge or triumph lasts forever. Conditions shift, and with them, so do you. There's freedom in knowing that the wheel is always turning, and that with each turn comes the possibility of something new. There's an old Buddhist parable about a wealthy man who returns home to find his house engulfed in flames. Inside, his children are playing, completely absorbed in their toys. They don't see the danger. They don't smell the smoke. The man calls to them, but they ignore him. They're too busy, too entertained. Finally, he changes his approach. He promises them new and better toys waiting outside. That gets their attention. They run out, and their lives are saved. The burning house is a metaphor for how we live when we cling to things that cannot last. We build our sense of security on jobs, relationships, possessions, identities, and plans for the future. We arrange these things like furniture, believing that if we can get the layout just right, we'll be safe. But everything in that house is made of wood and paper. It's all subject to the fire of impermanence. The job can be lost. The relationship can end. The body can weaken. The future can change overnight. The tragedy is not that things change, that's simply reality. The tragedy is that we mistake the temporary for the permanent and build our lives on that illusion. Like the children in the story, we get so caught up in our toys that we don't notice the flames licking at the edges. Letting go of false security isn't about rejecting the good things in life. It's about holding them lightly, knowing they are on loan, not guaranteed. When you enjoy a beautiful moment, you do so with gratitude, not grasping. When you face loss, you grieve without believing the loss has stolen your ground entirely. Stepping out of the burning house can be frightening because it means stepping into the open air of uncertainty. There are no walls to lean on, no ceiling overhead. But in that openness, you also find space to breathe. You realize the walls you thought were protecting you were also limiting you, and that the ceiling was blocking your view of the sky. The better toys the man promised in the parable are not literal rewards. They are the deeper joys that come when you stop relying on what can't last for your sense of safety, freedom, presence, the ability to meet life as it is, without demanding it be otherwise. You don't have to wait until the fire forces you out. You can begin now by looking honestly at what you're depending on for security. Ask yourself, is this truly stable, or am I mistaking it for something it's not? And if it's not, can I enjoy it while it's here, without clinging to it as my lifeline. The flames of change will come, whether we're ready or not. But if we've already learned to step outside, we can meet them not with panic, but with clarity. We can let the fire clear away what was never meant to be permanent, making space for what truly endures. There's a story from the Tibetan master Milarepa that sounds almost like a fable, yet carries one of the most practical teachings you can apply to your own life. One day, Milarepa returned to his cave to find it filled with demons, hideous, snarling, and completely at home in his space. They were eating his food, lounging in his bed, and staring him down as if daring him to try to remove them. At first, he did what most of us would do when faced with something frightening. He tried to fight them. He used every spiritual technique he knew to drive them out. But the more he resisted, the bigger and more terrifying they became. Finally, exhausted, he tried something radical. He stopped fighting. He said to them, "I see you're here, and you're not leaving. So, let's have some tea." One by one, the demons began to vanish, until only the largest, most fearsome one remained. Milarepa walked right up to it, put his head in its mouth, and said, "If you're going to eat me completely." In that moment of total surrender, the last demon disappeared. The demons in the story aren't supernatural creatures. They're the fears, griefs, insecurities, and painful memories we all carry. We usually meet them the way Milarepa first did, by resisting, distracting ourselves, or trying to push them away. But what we resist tends to grow stronger, feeding off the energy of our avoidance. Feeding demons means turning toward them with curiosity and compassion. It means sitting down with the parts of yourself you've been afraid to face and asking, "What do you need from me? What are you trying to tell me?" More often than not, you'll find that these demons are not here to destroy you. They're here because they're trying, in their clumsy way, to protect you. Self-criticism might be trying to shield you from the sting of others' criticism. Perfectionism might be trying to keep you safe from failure. Anger might be trying to guard a wound that feels too raw to touch. When you meet your inner demons this way, something changes. They soften, they lose their sharp edges. Sometimes they disappear entirely, sometimes they stay, but they stop running your life. The fear is still there, but it no longer drives your decisions. This practice doesn't mean you indulge destructive habits or wallow in difficult emotions. It means you stop treating them as enemies and start seeing them as messengers. By feeding them, giving them your attention, your patience, your willingness to listen, you transform your relationship with them. And in doing so, you reclaim the energy that was locked up in keeping them at bay. The next time a demon shows up, anxiety before a big meeting, loneliness on a quiet evening, anger in a tense conversation, pause. Instead of slamming the door, invite it to sit down, pour it a cup of tea. Ask it what it needs. You might just find that what you feared most has been waiting for you to stop running long enough to hear its truth. The Buddha's own life is the best illustration of the middle way. Before his awakening, he lived at both extremes. First, as a prince, he was surrounded by luxury, pleasure, and comfort. Anything he wanted was his. Then, after leaving the palace, he swung to the opposite end of the spectrum, practicing severe austerities, fasting until he was little more than skin and bone, enduring harsh conditions, denying himself every comfort. Neither path brought him peace. It was only when he abandoned both extremes and chose a balanced approach that his search came to fruition. The middle way is often misunderstood as compromise, as if it's about settling for a little bit of each side. But it's not about watering things down. It's about finding the point of harmony where effort is steady and sustainable. It's the difference between a guitar string that's too tight and one that's too loose. Too tight, and it snaps. Too loose, and it makes no sound. Just right, and it plays beautiful music. In daily life, the middle way might mean caring deeply about your work without letting it consume you. It could be maintaining healthy discipline without turning it into perfectionism. It might be loving someone fully without losing yourself in the process. It's the space between clinging and indifference, between over-effort and neglect. This balance isn't static, it's alive, shifting with the circumstances. Sometimes you lean a little more into effort, sometimes a little more into ease. Like a surfer adjusting to the shape of the wave, you make small corrections moment by moment to stay upright. The middle way isn't something you achieve once and keep forever. It's something you practice continuously. Walking the middle way requires self-awareness, because it's easy to slip back into extremes without noticing. You might be working hard toward a goal and tell yourself it's dedication, when in reality you've tipped into burnout. Or you might tell yourself you're taking a break, when you've actually slid into avoidance. The middle way asks for honesty, not just about your actions, but about the energy behind them. What makes this path so powerful is that it applies everywhere. In relationships, it's the balance between speaking your truth and listening with openness. In health, it's between nourishing your body and allowing yourself enjoyment. In spiritual practice, it's between disciplined effort and the willingness to let things unfold naturally. The middle way isn't about being moderate for moderation's sake. It's about finding the balance point where life can flow. And when you live from that place, you discover a quiet strength. You're no longer pulled so violently from one extreme to the other. You can move with life's changes without losing your footing, meeting both joy and difficulty with the same steady heart. The teaching of no self can feel unsettling at first. We spend our whole lives building and defending a sense of me, my name, my story, my likes and dislikes, my successes and failures. It feels solid, fixed, and permanent. But when you look closely, that self isn't a single thing. It's a flowing stream of experiences, thoughts, sensations, and emotions, constantly changing from moment to moment. Buddhism calls this anatta, or not self. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It means you don't exist in the rigid, unchanging way the mind assumes. You're not a statue carved from stone, you're a river, always moving, never exactly the same from one moment to the next. This is liberating, because if there's no fixed self to protect, you can stop exhausting yourself trying to keep up an image or story. You can respond freshly to life as it unfolds, without the constant pressure to be consistent with who you think you are. This insight is deeply connected to the role of suffering as a compass. The Buddha's first noble truth begins with the recognition that suffering, what he called dukkha, is part of life. But he didn't see it as punishment or as a flaw in the system. He saw it as information. Just as physical pain tells you to pull your hand away from a hot stove, emotional pain points towards something that needs attention. Anxiety might be telling you that a boundary is being crossed. Loneliness might be pointing you toward the need for connection. Frustration might be revealing values you're not honoring. The suffering itself isn't the problem, it's the messenger. The problem comes when we ignore it, fight it, or make it part of our identity. I am an anxious person. I am a lonely person. That's the self-concept reasserting itself, trying to make the temporary feel permanent. When you see suffering as a signal rather than a sentence, you start to listen differently. You stop asking, "How do I get rid of this?" and start asking, "What is this here to teach me?" Sometimes the lesson calls for action, changing a habit, having a hard conversation, asking for help. Sometimes the lesson is simply to stay present and let the feeling move through you, trusting it will pass, as all experiences do. And here's where no self and suffering meet. The less tightly you cling to an identity, the easier it is to work with suffering. You no longer have to defend a fixed you against the reality of change. You can allow life to teach you, moment by moment, without making those moments a definition of your worth. Coming home to yourself, in this sense, means coming home to the awareness beneath all the changing conditions, to the part of you that can watch joy come and go, watch pain rise and fade without losing its ground. It's the sky, not the clouds. And once you know yourself as that, you realize you've been home all along.